All right, so good morning, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants with me. It is so nice to have you back. I know we've got a lot of familiar faces in the crowd, but if you are new to us, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. Now, today's program is exciting for a whole bevy of reasons. Number one, it is February, our entire month dedicated solely to incredible women in science and exploration. It's classically one of our biggest months. We've been doing this since 2015, and we really appreciate all the amazing people that have come on to share their stories from around the globe, and all the girls that have asked questions in classes, particularly over the last few days. It's been really, really nice to see. Secondly, this is a continuation of our epic series since October with ExploreCan. So this is a collaboration, a partnership between us at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, the amazing Canadian Geographic education team, and Heritage Canada, featuring stories talking about Canadian stories of exploration and history. We've done a bevy of programs. We just wrapped up one yesterday with Siobhan Darlington talking about cougars. We've got two more in early March on paleontology and extreme weather, and I'm really excited to have the chance to continue on with this really amazing series we've had the chance to do over the last few months. And most importantly, this is a program with Jill Heinerth, my favorite speaker we've ever had on the broadcast. She's been joining us since our inception back in 2015. We have done, I think, 30 programs with her over the years. You can check them all out on our YouTube page. She is an author of Into the Planet, which is an incredible book. She's done a little bit of everything. She's the world's top cave diver. She's on the cover of magazines. She's been lauded by every organization in terms of exploration and diving on this planet. And today she's got a very special and unique story for us. I'm going to do something I almost never do and read it right off the description of this because it's so cool. So, beneath the cold waters off Newfoundland, where I'm joining from today, lie the remains of numerous World War II shipwrecks. The wrecks reveal the stories of spies, secret cargo, a struggle for survival, and an unlikely hero that pushed the bounds of civil rights. If that's not a great lead into a program, I don't know what is. And so I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to turn it over to Jill to highlight this adventure. And thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to hear it myself.
Oh, thanks for having me again. It's great to be here with you, and thanks also to a lot of people I know are experiencing snow days today. So I appreciate that you came to join us, even if you had difficulty getting to school or at home today. So as Jesse was telling you, I'm going to pack a lot into a really short period of time, and I hope I get through all of it. But to begin with, I just want to share with you a little bit about what I do. So I am a full-time underwater explorer, and I use specialized technology in order to do some pretty extreme diving, deep and into underwater cave systems, and also under the ice, both in the Arctic as well as in the Antarctic. And my work takes me all around the world to places where you might not even imagine that people dive, like under the Sahara Desert in this very strange looking water hole. Or I even get to interact with animals like these huge whale sharks off Mexico, or I've swam with wild polar bears in Canada's Arctic. But a lot of the work that I do does involve this high technology approach to going inside the planet, inside underwater cave systems, and surveying these spaces and learning about all the different sciences that we can investigate in these underwater cave systems. But today, I'm going to share with you a little bit about an expedition I just came back from in the fall called the Great Island Expedition in Newfoundland. And I know it says 2020 there, and as you know, COVID canceled a lot of things, so we didn't get there until the fall of 2022. This project took us all around Newfoundland to many different spots where we did some workup dives, but also where we were diving on wrecks that happened in World War II. There are hundreds of shipwrecks off of Newfoundland. It's quite remarkable. So there was very active warfare occurring right here in what are now Canadian waters. Just to give you a few quick little visuals of the Newfoundland landscape above and below first, there are remarkable places to dive in Newfoundland, full of color and full of abundant life. And I want you to pay attention to a little bit of this life that you see growing on the rocks and on the seafloor, because you'll see in a few minutes the very same things will actually grow all over shipwrecks. So shipwrecks become artificial reefs, really recruiting things to grow all over those rusting, stainless steel plate or steel plates. But also, they become a home for other organisms that will then move into spaces where they want to live and they can get some shelter and protection in these wrecks. So first, I'm going to take you to Gander, Newfoundland. So you can see it right there above my head in the middle of the circle. And some people will already know about Gander for a number of reasons. So if you are just interested in 9/11 history, then you'll know that when the airspace was shut down over North America, all of a sudden a lot of planes had to land very quickly, and an awful lot of them ended up in Gander, Newfoundland. And that actually spawned a very beautiful story about how the local people took in all these unexpected visitors and gave them food and clothing and took care of them until the airspace opened up again. But Gander was also a really important airport in World War II because planes weren't very long range, and anything that wanted to cross the Atlantic would land here to refuel first. So there was quite a big military presence here, and in fact, there was a base really where a lot of planes were taking off and trying to protect the eastern seaboard of North America from U-boat attacks. So, what I'm first going to take you to is just a little part of our expedition where we located the remains of a B-24 Liberator aircraft that looks like this. One thing I want you to pay quick attention to is the far end of the photo. Those are tail stabilizers, those oval parts of the aircraft. And you'll see like a little faint sort of marking that looks like a flag on it. Just file that in your brain for a minute. So we went to Gander because this gentleman, Tony Merkel, had been trying to find where this bomber went down almost 80 years earlier. There had been eyewitnesses to the crash, and we knew the squadron that it came from. And there was another plane actually from the same squadron that crashed in Labrador. And currently, there was a guy in St. John's who's trying to restore the remains of this aircraft that he brought back from the Labrador crash site. And you can see that, the plane crash remains start, pretty rough. But this guy in St. John's, his name is Robert Mayer, is actually trying to restore the original aircraft from the same squadron of the one that we were searching for. So that gave me a chance to go to his workshop and see basically how far he'd gotten. So we can see the inside of the fuselage, but right above me here, we can see this little thing called a gunner's turret. And there was a person that would actually sit in there, and in these little baskets, there would be these long chains basically of ammunition. And I'll show you what they look like in a minute. They would sit there and feed into the gun that would be sticking out basically towards us. So it's pretty interesting to be able to look at this and compare it to what we saw on the bottom of the lake in Gander. Well, not quite the bottom, actually. So a gentleman named Kirk Regular from the Newfoundland Labrador Shipwreck Preservation Society was actually doing a very high level side scan sonar operation on the lake. And so he was pulled over by Tony Merkel to this spot to see if he could locate the aircraft. And as you can see, it kind of looks like an aircraft covered by silt. And so that's what we went to dive on and do the very first dives. First, we needed a permit from Newfoundland in order to dive there because this is really a heritage site that's very important to manage the dives carefully. And our team went out there into the lake to tie on to what we thought were the remains of the aircraft. And when we descended down in the very, very dark water, it's so dark that my camera sensor, like the viewfinder, saw the aircraft before I did. So we tied right into the upside down aircraft with the landing wheels sticking up and started to try and get the best images that we could. And things were pretty damaged, but you could see here there's one of the wheels from the aircraft. This is part of the wing. This is the underside of the wing with a very special little light that helped us to identify the aircraft. Here we have some of those gunner's belts. So each one of those little slots held a 50 caliber bullet basically, and they fed into that little basket I showed you a minute ago. And this is actually what we call an intervalometer. And you dial in the dials to indicate how many bombs that you want to drop and how quickly you want to drop them. So you set that and then hit go, and then the aircraft bomb bay doors open and let the bombs fall out of the aircraft. This is some of that 50 caliber, the bullets that are in that little feed belt there. And here's part of the actual fuselage of the aircraft. So one person was able to be removed. The remains of one person was able to be removed from the aircraft, but there are still three souls inside here. So again, we treat this with the utmost respect. We take only pictures. We don't touch anything. Now, this is the tail stabilizer upside down underwater, and you can see this red and then a gap and then the blue painted on it. And that's the same marking that I showed you earlier on that archival photograph. And that enabled us to identify that it was this particular bomber. So as I mentioned, there is one person that is buried in the graveyard near Gander. And so we've handed all of the photographs and the video and the survey information over to a group called the Casualty Identification Lab, and they can decide whether they want to remove the remains of the last men on board. They'll consult with the descendants of these people, and then the Memorial University of Newfoundland will also be receiving all the photos and video in case they can use them to, for archaeology, maybe to make a model of what remains. So this plane is also associated with shipwrecks that we find over closer to St. John's, Newfoundland. There's St. John's right there, and the shipwrecks are in this harbor here, off of Bell Island. And those airplanes used to patrol this whole coast and look for submarines and try and shoot at submarines that were marauding and terrorizing the coast in Newfoundland, but also down the United States, eastern seaboard. And what's interesting is that aircraft that was crashed in uh, uh, further north, not the one in Gander, but the one up in Labrador. That was actually actively part of the patrols that was trying to protect these particular wrecks. So we've got four shipwrecks here in Bell Island on the bottom. And these shipwrecks, as you can see, are covered by marine life today. So they're real artificial reefs, really recruiting life. And this is the radio room of one of the wrecks, where someone would have probably been yelling an SOS at the moment that this wreck was going down. We also have defensive guns on these wrecks. And so these are guns that they would have shot had they seen an aircraft coming after them, or if they'd seen the U-boat, but they didn't see the U-boat before these wrecks were sunk, because the wrecks went down really quickly after they were struck by torpedoes, like in 30 seconds in one case, 90 seconds in another case. And they're very much intact, sitting on the bottom, but with just great big gaping torpedo holes in them. And these wrecks were actually part of convoys that were transporting iron ore from the Bell Island mine. And the iron ore that they got out of this mine was a very high grade of iron ore that was used in the shipbuilding and weapon building efforts in World War II. And today, that mine is also flooded, and we can swim through the mine and look at the industrial archaeology left behind inside the mine. Now, also on this project, we looked at the U.S. Truxton and Pollux wrecks that were sunk off the Burin Peninsula in Newfoundland. And these two wrecks, they're much more scattered and broken up. But what was interesting is part of the history of those wrecks. Because back in World War II, Black men that wanted to be a part of the US Navy could not be full sailors. And so people of color that were on some of these ships worked in the bottom of the ships, lived in the bottom of the ships in very, bad conditions. They were never allowed off the ships. And they acted as mess stewards, like cooking and shining the shoes for the officers on board. And they basically stayed out of sight until a battle ensued. And when there was a battle, they would have to come topside and actually man the battle stations with everyone else. But we were looking at a couple of shipwrecks that went down by hitting the rocks in Newfoundland. So they weren't sunk as part of battle, but they went down very quickly. And we learned about a man named Lanier Phillips, a Black man that was a mess steward back in those days. And he exhibited great heroism in his efforts to both get off the wreck, and then after his experiences during World War II, he also showed great courage in moving to support civil rights. So Lanier Phillips, when he was trapped inside the boat as it was starting to sink, he scrambled topside, got ashore, and then passed out on the beach at the bottom of this very, very sheer cliff because it was February in 1943 and it was a terrible storm. And so Lanier summoned as much energy as he possibly could to get ashore, and then he passed out, really willing and ready to die. And a Newfoundlander came up to him and grabbed him by the shoulder and said, "Hey, man, don't give up or you will surely die." And when he woke up next, he was inside a mine, and there were women surrounding him and scrubbing oil off of his body because all the men became drenched in oil as they tried to swim ashore. And as they scrubbed and scrubbed and scrubbed, they were hurting Lanier. And he said, "Ma'am, you can scrub all you want, but that's the color of my skin." And so Lanier, for the first time, was like basically terrified and afraid that he might get lynched by just confessing that he was a black man. But these women were fascinated. They were like, "Oh boy, isn't that something? I've never seen a black man." And they took, great honor at taking care of him and nursing him back to health. But for Lanier, a descendant of sharecroppers and slaves, it was the first time that he recognized that he deserved the rights of every human. And Lanier Phillips, that man that was trapped inside that wreck in Newfoundland waters, and given the humanity and kindness from the Newfoundland people, went on to become a great civil rights leader and a great engineer. He became the first Black sonar operator in the US Navy, a full member of the US Navy eventually. He also worked alongside people from Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution and Jacques Cousteau as an engineer oceanographer. And finally, he actually walked the Edmund Pettus Bridge with civil rights hero Martin Luther King Jr. So, a man that showed great courage in the icy waters of Newfoundland and became a folk hero to the people of the Burin Peninsula, um, was sort of lost to history. And so I'm really touched that our expedition gave a chance to tell his story, even just a little bit, and remind people about how much has changed in the 80 years since World War II. So I think this is a great opportunity to open it up for questions about any of those finds that we've made, or even just about underwater exploration.
Oh,
So,
Jill, what a great story. I've shared to Lanier. There's a fantastic Newfoundland article in Saltscapes on his life and work. And so I've encouraged people to
great.
check it out in the chat on YouTube and in the StreamYard chat. But we're going to dive in with questions. Now, Ms. Ball's class, I know you got a few students in the class. If you want to let us know in the chat if you have questions, I'll happily come to you. But I will begin in Tuscaloosa with Ms. Foster's class, studying World War II. So if you guys want to come on in and kick us off, you're good to go. Hey, guys.
Hello. Hello.
So what's your favorite exploration you've done?
Ooh, that's so hard because every project that I do is sort of so new and different that it's incredibly exciting for me, no matter what I do. But I think I'm pretty fond of some of the work that I get to do in the Arctic, like underneath the sea ice. Like here's a picture underneath the sea ice. I just think it's quite beautiful, and I feel like when I'm diving in these polar regions, in and around the ice, that it feels very much like I'm diving in an endangered environment that's that we may not see in the future. So documenting these places, these really cold places, is quite a pleasure for me. So great question.
Great question, guys. Ms. Balaglass did have one. They want to know if there's any impacts in the physiology of coral visits living on the shipwrecks. If you know anything about that, I think it's a really neat idea.
Oh, you mean from like living on the iron itself? Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
great question. I don't actually know. I don't actually know the answer to that. It's interesting, but we do find life everywhere. Like we even find life inside, that mine, in the complete blackness. And so life sort of persists everywhere. Like in the mine, we actually have iron oxidizing bacteria that's eating the iron in the mine. So I know there's effects on the shipwreck from things growing on it. So there must be effects on the corals and things as well. So great question. I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, I'm going to show just a quick picture. Something that we had the chance to feature over the last few months is the Endurance wreck. And when they went down, they found all this incredible life on this
Yeah.
shipwreck way beneath the water. And I mean, this is something that, again, we're really starting to dive into in the big way in the last 10 years. Is this idea of the sea floor in really cold, dark areas near the poles being just teeming with biodiversity. And it's really
Yep.
interesting to see how it sort of adapts to those environments. So great question, guys.
Yeah.
All right, Miss Plant, Stratford District, Miss Cottarello, grade 6 virtual school. If you guys want to unmute your mics and I'll know you're good for questions, I'll come to you one by one. Miss Cottarello, you're sitting right in the camera, so I'm going to come to you guys first. Welcome in grade 6s. Hi.
Hello. Hi. Weston has a question here. Thank you. That was an amazing presentation. But Weston has a question about diving.
Yes, please.
Have you ever had any close to death situations when you've been diving?
Yeah, so diving can be dangerous, especially the kind of diving I do where I'm going places that nobody's ever been before. So yeah, I've been inside an iceberg when the currents were so strong that I almost couldn't get out. So that was a bit of a close call. I've been in a cave when my scientific partner had a bad day and got stuck and panicked. And so, like, when we go diving, like, before we go underwater, we have to ask ourselves, am I capable of getting myself home safely? So, am I capable of self rescue? And am I capable and willing? Do I have the tools and the training to do a buddy rescue as well? So, before I go underwater, I'm telling myself, yeah, I got this. I can handle whatever happens. So, on the day that she got panicked and stuck and broke the guideline, there was a lot of things that went wrong. But because I got in the water knowing I could handle all that, everything came out okay.
Yeah.
So
I always
thank you
love
for that.
when you get this question because it gives you the chance to highlight the importance of preparation. I mean, when you're
Yeah.
doing something like diving in a really challenging situation or something that would be for most people something that they would never attempt, there's so much work that goes into that. The planning of it, individual diving, the skill development over many years to get to that place where you feel comfortable when a guideline's cut and someone's panicking and you can get them out safely,
Mhm.
calmly, comfortably. But it begins with that sense of calm and recognition that you have the skill. So great question, guys.
Absolutely.
Miss Plant's class, I'm going to head to you. You got someone right at the camera, so come on in and take us away. Hi.
Hi, I have a question. Have you found any active weapons during your underwater explorations?
Oh,
Yeah.
that's great. Interesting question. A lot of the shipwrecks that go down have a lot of ammunition on them. So not just bullets, but bombs, right? Like, so the Truxton and the Pollux wrecks that we were exploring in Newfoundland, we found 500-pound bombs just sitting on the ocean floor, right? So 2 years ago, the Belle Island shipwrecks basically got cleaned up by the Canadian military. So they went through all the wrecks, they removed the bombs and the bullets, and they actually got to go take them off into a field and blow them up. So yeah, there is still a lot of unexploded stuff underwater.
Well, so that's, I mean, as a follow up to this, the fact that they could still blow up after that time, I mean, are you careful not to touch anything? Like,
Yeah.
how much of a course do you need in ammunition? Like, is there a risk that you're diving and you touch something and it actually explodes? Like, are you paying really
Well,
close attention to what you're seeing?
theoretically, I suppose. Like, I mean, when I dive down in Micronesia, there's World War II shipwrecks in a place called Truk Lagoon. And there's ships that have literally entire holds full of mines, right? And so all of those are decaying in the salt water. And so they're not stable. And that's just one more good reason why whenever we dive, we don't touch anything. So we try and hover neutral and not touch the bottom with our body, and then we don't touch whether it's wildlife or wrecks. We don't touch anything. So yeah.
Fascinating.
Mhm.
Stratford District, I will come to you guys in a second. Just unmute your mic and I'll know you're good to go. But grade 6 virtual school, our Unionville friends, if you guys want to come on in, you're all set. Hey.
Thank you for sharing your stories with us. Oh my goodness. My kids want to know what made you start wanting to explore the sea. So how did you develop that interest?
Thank you for that question. That's great. So when I was a little kid, We didn't have the internet. We only had 2 TV stations. And so a lot of us had this really common experience watching the same shows, right? So on Sunday nights, everyone my age watched Jacques Cousteau's Undersea Adventures and a program called Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. So it was an animal show. And I think that really stimulated a lot of us. But I also grew up in the time of watching live Apollo astronauts landing on the moon. So all of those things made me very curious. And as a kid, I remember expressing that curiosity to my family saying, I want to be an astronaut. And they're like, honey, there's no Canadian space program and there are no girl astronauts. Okay, well, I want to be a diver. And they're like, honey, I don't think people dive in Canada. It's too cold here. But, it really was my own personal sense of wanting to be an explorer because I was curious about so many things. And so I didn't get to pursue that early on until like really sort of at the end of my university career and moving into, my early career when I realized that I really wanted to chase those passions full time. And so I had to kind of make a career as an underwater explorer, with a lot of like self direction and self study, and grit and determination, I think.
Well, I always love when we get this question. It's such a beautiful story. You detail a little bit more of it in your book that I will
I
also
do.
hog again. Here, I can hold it in the same spot that you have it if you'd like. I really encourage, especially our older students, to check that out. The Aquanaut for younger students today. You're a fantastic author. It really is a beautiful read.
Thank you.
And I always like to highlight this too for students because I think almost everyone, if not everyone today, fits the bill. When you're 8 years old, Patty Bubble Maker, you can start on the path to becoming a scuba diver. And so everyone here, if you want to, and even if you're in the middle of a continent, you don't need to be on an ocean. I learned in Toronto, you go to quarries, lakes, pools, whatever, and it is one of the most magical experiences in the world because it opens up 70% of the world to you and all these experiences that you've had that would not be possible without that diving background. So I really encourage students to do it. It's such a great way to develop skills and friendships and all sorts of things. So check that out when you're done. Stratford District, I'm going to head to you guys. You're just audio, so you're a voice in the ether, but do ask a question.
We had a similar question, which was, what did you study in school? And then how did you become a professional explorer? But you answered part of that already.
Yeah. No, but you'll probably be surprised to learn like that I studied fine arts in university. So when I was in high school, I was like, what do I want to be? What do I want to do when I grow up? And I was really interested in science. I was interested in medicine. I was interested in arts. I was interested in a lot of things. And I ended up taking a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Visual Communications Design. And I started my career as a graphic designer artist. And then I realized that although I like the creative process and expressing myself creatively, I didn't want to work indoors. And I literally, like sitting in my office, went, I feel claustrophobic. I want to be doing creative work underwater, because I was always trying to figure out how to go diving every day of work. It was like, have I got my work done? I want to go diving. Um, so I moved from being a full-time professional artist to selling everything and pursuing my interests as a diver, and then slowly bringing the creative part back into my career again.
Yeah. I really like that you highlighted that it's sort of surprising. And one thing that I find in these programs, I get the chance to hear from a lot of explorers and scientists, is that the most creative people, my favorite people that we bring on consistently and universally, have a fine arts background, whether it's music or painting or drawing or theater. The sort of mindset that you develop, the skills that you gain doing that really translate beautifully into a creative approach to life. And I really encourage our students, if you're thinking that you're a science student and that that's not for you and that you should do one or the other, do both or make sure you have that.
It's such a good point. And, I grew up at a time when I think we undervalued artists. And so, we put a lot of prestige on the doctors, the lawyers, and the scientists, and we undervalued the artists. But artists and mathematicians or artists and engineers work with different parts of their brain. We have different ideas, different ways of expressing ourselves. And when we get together and create synergy, that's everything that I do. So I work with biologists, I work with anthropologists, I work with historians, I work with hydrologists, I work with doctors, engineers. And when we work together, we have such different viewpoints that's where the magic happens. And we need a lot more people that are good collaborators that can think and be creative and share their ideas in order to solve really big and daunting issues like climate change, water issues. So no matter what you're interested in, there is a place for you. What's important is critical thinking and collaboration and working hard.
Jill, there's hard to be a better message than that. It's almost like a perfect wrap-up message, but we've got 15 more minutes together, so we got lots of time
Yay.
for more questions,
Oh,
which is great.
good.
I'm going to share one from our friends online. Izzy in grade 7 in Miss Cloutier's class wants to know, no pressure at all, what's the coolest thing you've ever discovered while diving?
Ooh, from Petawawa, I've discovered a lot of really cool things, but I'm just trying to queue up a picture here if I can. Um, but I'm gonna queue up this story just because it's near you. So
Ooh.
there's a pretty cool um, underwater cave, Canada's longest underwater cave system that's near Westmeath. So I'm almost driving through Pembroke just to get there. And I'm pretty darn excited about the mussels that are inside this cave because I've never seen as much concentration of life. Whoops, sorry, I'm going to get there in a second. As I have in, here we go, this underwater cave. Now, the visibility is not great. It's very high flow. It's a dangerous, dangerous cave system that's difficult to dive in. But I'm going there because of a really cool thing that I learned. And that's that mussels, so these shells, right? They're actually males and females. And you might not have known that. A lot of them are separate males and females. And so when they need to reproduce, the male like sends sperm into the water, the female collects it, and then the female does this really cool thing. She actually captures that sperm, grows little babies, and right up there, that's a pregnant mussel. And you can see two little wings of her own flesh. She's actually growing a lure. She's growing a fishing lure. And the fishing lure she uses and vibrates it to attract a fish. And then the fish comes in, bites at the lure, and she sprays her young into the mouth of the fish. And then those young, tiny, microscopic shells actually grab on to the gills or the fins of the fish, and they act like little vampires sucking the blood serum from the fish for a few weeks, a month, or longer until the fish's immune system actually casts off those little babies into the bottom, and they stay there for a couple of years before resurfacing as individuals, like juveniles that grow for 1 to 200 years. And there's literally like millions of these mussels inside this cave. So I thought that was pretty cool because I've never seen an animal with no eyes and brain build a lure that has fake eyes and looks just like a fish. So I thought that was pretty cool. And it's right near you in Pembroke.
Jill, I'm a biologist by background. I love parasitism stories and weird things like that. I've never heard that specific tale. That's one of the freakiest things ever. I
Isn't
love
it
it.
wild? Yeah.
Oh, it's fantastic. Nature's great. I'm curious. I'm going to ask a question and then we'll go back for another round with all our classes live today. And any YouTubers that want to share, please do. But you talked about sort of this importance of treating these areas with respect. These are war graves in some cases. And so I'm curious what that process is like if people do want to have bodies removed and buried. Who do you talk to about that? Are you the person that would actually be involved in that sort of process, or how does that work?
So all around the world, there are organizations that are still repatriating the remains of and identifying the remains of lost sailors and soldiers from World War I, World War II, and other conflicts. Um, Canada has not taken as active a a decision in terms of actually removing remains and repatriating them, or well, they're at home actually in this case, um, but it's not as common in Canada to do that. So they take a lot of time to speak with the descendants. Is this something the families would want them to do? If they're going to, let's say, raise that aircraft and restore it, then obviously the first step would be to do that because they're not just going to disregard the fact that there were people lost on an aircraft. And so oftentimes this is done like within the military operation itself or within a particular division of either the US Navy or the or Canadian. But at times they do bring in civilian experts for particular dives that are of a very challenging nature. Like I could imagine that if they made a decision to do that at this particular aircraft, that they might look for myself or someone, with similar experiences that's able to dive deeper in these very cold and dark environments. And so it's really sort of a matter of need. Yeah.
Yeah. What an honor to even be considered for something like that. What
Oh,
a
yeah.
profound thing to be involved with just generally.
Mhm.
Let's head back to Miss Foster's class. Tuscaloosa, if you have a second question for us, come on in.
Yeah, they might get to fly 2 years, and they did.
Oh, there we go. What happened? What was your favorite part of riding into the planet?
Oh, that's great.
Ooh.
So as I've gone through all my expeditions over the years, I've actually kept journals. And thank goodness, because I don't think I could have written this book if I didn't have those records of my very detailed memories. Because, we change a lot through life. So I'm not the person that I was when I was 20. I'm 58 years old now. And I also will forget the details if I don't have those journals. So one of the fun things was actually going back and rereading those journals and remembering stories that I'd forgotten, but also, looking back on like how I thought and what things bothered me or excited me when I was a 20-year-old. So I think that was a fun thing, revisiting all those stories.
Yeah. What a nice and thoughtful question. Thanks, Miss Foster's class.
Mm.
Ms. Ball, again, if you have a question, please do share in the chat. I'd love to take one from you if you're keen. But we will head to Miss Colorello's class. If you guys want to unmute your mic and come on in, you are good to go. Hey, grade sixes. Hi.
Maisie has a question.
Maisie?
I was wondering, what's your favorite part of diving or an expedition?
Ooh, I love anticipation. So I'm very curious and I like learning about new things. So like I liked learning and researching all about Linear Phillips even before I went to dive on the USS Truxtun. So I really like that, the planning and the anticipation. Like I like figuring out, okay, well, what issues, what risks, what dangers will we face? How should we prepare? Do we need to do any training? So I really like the planning and the preparation. I don't like the the plane travel so much. It's getting so tough to carry my gear all around the world, but once I'm there, I'm excited.
You'll have to write another book, make it big, and hire someone to carry the luggage behind you. That's just
I'm working on another book right now, Jesse. So
Ooh.
yeah.
We're in the future. Miss Ball, you just typed it in the chat. But I just wanted to see that if you wanted a question, so I will come to you in person because I like you. So come on in. Hey.
Hey, Jesse. Jill, you mentioned, that you're kind of uniquely qualified to dive in deeper waters and colder conditions. I just wondered if you could talk to us about, what kind of special training and equipment gives you that ability?
Sure, yeah. So when you first learn to dive, you do something called an open water diver course. And I think, Jesse, you just did that how long ago now? Not too long.
A little over 2 years ago. It was yeah, it's great. You do a few dives in a pool, you do a few dives in a quarry. It's a really fantastic experience.
Yeah, yeah. And when you learn to scuba dive, you learn to dive with one tank. You take in a breath, exhale, make bubbles, right? But as we sort of expand in range, we start to carry more tanks. Like we'll carry 2 or 4 tanks and carry a camera. And then as we go sort of deeper and further into the planet, we start to use gear like this. This is called a rebreather. So this is where we're actually exhaling, but we're not making bubbles anymore. We're recapturing those bubbles and scrubbing them free of carbon dioxide. And we're actually mixing our life support gases, helium, nitrogen, oxygen, in varying percentages in order to safely go deeper or stay longer underwater. So there's a lot of technology and a lot of gear because we also have to carry not just the rebreather, but a lot of backup tanks and equipment in case something goes wrong. So it's really a series of courses that you take over the years, but in between those courses, you need to develop your proficiency and practice. And I have over 8,000 dives now in my logs. So I've been doing this a lot for a long time, but it's really opened up a lot of incredible opportunities to go to places that nobody's ever been before.
Yeah. Is there just a quick follow-up on this? We've got time for a few more questions with our live classes. Is there a record for most dives ever? Are you it? Are you close?
No.
No.
Oh, no. I mean, because there's some people that live in warmer places than this that dive 4 times a day, for their whole life. So I have no idea who's done the most dives,
Oh,
but there is a club. Once you've done 5,000 dives, you get this special like platinum little card that
cool.
makes you part of the club.
That's pretty cool. Secret meetings underwater and amazing locations.
Yeah. Yeah.
Miss Plant's class, we're going to head to you guys. If you have a question for us, you're good to go. Hey.
So what do I have to say?
Whatever you want.
Say again? How was the deepest going?
The deepest dive?
Yes.
Yeah, the deepest dive I did was a series of dives in Bermuda here, where we were going 460 feet deep down the bank or the Bermuda Bank, this giant wall. Bermuda is actually an ancient volcanic atoll, and so it's a very, very sheer wall. We were going down looking for caves, but also for new life forms that hadn't been documented before. And those were the deepest man dives that had ever been done in Bermuda. So the first time people had like hands and eyes down on these ledges where we brought back new life forms that had never been described before.
Cool.
Yeah.
Stratford District, if you want to unmute your mic, grade 6 virtual school. Whoever unmutes your mic first, basically, I will come to next. We got 2 more live classes with us. Let's see. I know our grade 6 virtual school friends asked another question earlier. I don't know if they've had. Oh, there they are. Let's see. Unionville. Oh, hi guys. Oh, your mic isn't on for some reason. It's on, like it should be working, but it's not. So,
sorry about that.
Oh, there you go.
So it looks scary, and they were wondering if there were anything kind of fears that you had to get over while you were going through this journey of diving.
Your favorite.
I'm doing a happy dance because it's my favorite question. and thankfully people ask that all the time. I am always afraid. And that's a really important lesson to know, is that when we're afraid, it means that we make good choices about the risks that we're about to take. And so it's a sign of respect that you're doing something dangerous. So I'm afraid, and I want to dive with people that are afraid, because it means we all want to come home safe at the end of the day. And then what's important is that as I'm stepping into the darkness, doing something I've never done before, is that we're careful and we're taking these small baby steps as we move into that blackness. But appreciate that being afraid is okay, as long as you have sort of mentally dealt with all of those risks before you go in the water. Then you're good to go. So embrace that fear. It means you're standing on the edge of discovery.
I've seen that happy dance like 30 times. We get that question every program. We never go one without it. So I'm really glad you guys asked that. Stratford District, if you want to unmute your mic, I'll come to you in a quick second. Miss Cottarello, I do really like your question, so I'm going to take it as an extra bonus question today, okay? So come on in and share away, grade 6s. Hey.
So Michael had a question.
Yeah.
And Sylvia, if it's not, might have one too.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Have you ever found any World War II era enemy wrecks, and what would you do in this case?
So yeah, there are lots of German U-boats, or the question also is like, what is an enemy wreck? So I just came back from Truk Lagoon, so that's down in Micronesia, and that's a place where Operation Hailstone happened, where the U.S. and Allied forces sunk over like the entire Japanese fleet. So those were enemy vessels back in World War II, right? But the Japanese are obviously our friends today. And I've swam on the Belle Island shipwrecks with my German partner, whose ancestors would have been enemies during World War II. So it's sort of a matter of context. My enemy will later be my friend as time passes.
Yeah, I like that question very much. And I will note, I know all our classes have more questions than we could possibly take in one broadcast, but Jill has graciously agreed. If you want to check out her website, you can email her there. She's very responsive. Get into more queries, because I know we could keep a question period going all day long. But we will wrap up live with one more with our Stratford District friends. You're a voice in the ether again. Share away.
Have you ever been involved in any type of project with the government where they're trying to recover an artifact?
Yeah, so on the Belle Island shipwrecks, that's the most recent one anyway, we found some sextants. So they're about a hand-sized navigational device, and And they can be a really important artifact because often the sextant used to navigate the ship was passed down through generations. So they could be much, much older than the shipwrecks themselves. So we found the location of 2 sextants and knew that because it was such a small and priceless artifact, that if it was just lying around on the deck, it might go missing. So
Yeah.
we applied to the province of Newfoundland for a permit, and it took 2 years to get that permit because it's not just to give us permission to retrieve it, but they need to have a plan in place to protect it once we bring it to the surface, because as soon as it's exposed to air, it'll start to rust or degrade. So with the permit, we had this planned dive where we went down, we brought it up, and then we very carefully passed it off to the museum curators who are still working on conserving it. It can take 7 or 10 years or more to stabilize something that's been in the seawater.
I love that story, and I really encourage our students to look up a sextant because it's a device that makes you instantly look like you're an explorer who knows what you're doing. Like the moment you're holding a sextant, you look cool. Like it could be just handed to you in a field, and you're like, okay, now, yeah, I could track the waters of the world. I can do anything I want with this thing.
Yes.
Jill, this has been such a fun expedition and story. I really encourage our students to check it out, share with their friends and family, check out intotheplanet.com, both to ask you additional questions and to check out your amazing books. Before we wrap up, I always like to ask if there's a final message you want to leave us with before I bring back in all our students to say a big thank you. So anything to wrap up today?
Oh, just go out, step into the darkness and explore, because that's when you have an opportunity for discovery for yourself or maybe for all of humanity.
What a perfect message. The exploring, it should be the exploring by the seat of your pants motto, actually. We'll talk to you about that and see if we can trademark it. What we'll do, as we always do, I'm going to bring in all our students, Miss Ball, Miss Foster, Miss Plant, Stratford District, Miss Colorado, Grade 6 Virtual School. Thank you all so much for being here today, everybody. Have a wonderful day, and bye for now, guys. Thank you so much.
Bye.